In this section, we're going to look at object pooling. This is one of numerous game design patterns and one of my favourite. Now, what you're currently seeing on the screen is the old retro game Space Invaders. And Space Invaders, when they first created it, had very limited memory resources. So they implemented this object pooling idea. What it does is to limit the number of bullets that are available to the game at any one time so that you don't end up overloading the system or running out of memory. And this is quite a popular game design pattern that's still used today to, manage the resources that you've got and manage the creation and destruction of game objects that you want to create over and over again, especially bullets. So let's jump right into Unity and start putting together a little semi-game project. To begin, open up a new Unity 3D project and then bring in the package that's attached to this lecture, which is called Space Attack. When you bring it in, open up the object pooling scene that's in your assets and you will get this. So we've got some really nice little Star Trek inspired icons that are in there. You'll see you've got a ship and there's a camera, there's a light, not really using the light. So we're just working with sprites in this case. Now there's already a script in there called Drive. Drag and drop that Drive script from your assets onto the ship. In the inspector, you'll see that you'll be able to change the speed in there of how this ship moves. Now, it's only going to move left and right. So let's just press play and have a real quick look at that. You can use your arrow keys to move it back and forward. What we're going to do is to have asteroids rain down on this ship, and we're also going to make the ship be able to shoot at the asteroids and destroy them. So there'll be two types of pools that we will create eventually in this project. One for our bullet objects and one for all of the asteroids. Let's begin by creating our prefab for the bullet. So in the assets, we're going to find a bullet image, which is just there. Now, what we need to do when you've got a straight PNG is to turn that into a sprite. So in this case, this PNG isn't a sprite. To make it a sprite, select it, go to the inspector, and then you want to, at the very top where it says texture type, drop that down and set it to sprite 2D. Then we're going to just click apply. You'll see that in the assets it changes its look and it has a little play button next to it, which just rolls it out. The asteroid image is already a sprite, so you don't have to do that for the asteroid. Now let's grab this bullet and put it onto a sprite. So what we're going to do in the hierarchy is right click in there, 2D object, and add a sprite. And let's call this sprite the bullet prefab. Now with that, we're going to set the image for the sprite. So we can grab our bullet sprite and you can see it's actually already picked it up from there. It just knew about it. But if it doesn't, just drag and drop your sprite from there and to the sprite section that's in your inspector. And you can see that that bullet is now on the screen. Now, if you've just opened this up, it might not look nice and crisp and clear. By default, what Unity does in the game view under the settings for the resolution is has this low resolution box ticked, and when that's ticked your sprites don't look very crisp, so just turn that off and you'll get them looking quite nice. Now this bullet needs to collide with the asteroids in order to destroy them, so select your bullet in the hierarchy. What we're going to do over in the inspector is add a component, and we're going to look for a Circle Collider 2D. Click on that. Over in the 2D view or 3D view, whichever one you're currently looking at, you'll see that your bullet gets this nice little round circle around it. That's your collider. Now you can change the size of that in the inspector by adjusting the radius to whatever you want. And we kind of want it just sort of neatly sitting around it. You could, I guess, just restrict it to the top part of this. And if you had a different shaped bullet, you could use a box collider or some other sort of shape as well. Or not a box collider, a more of a square collider, which is your box 2D. All right, so we've got that. Now let's add some code to make the bullet move up the screen. So in our assets, I'm going to right click, create a C# script, call it move, and then open that up in your editor. We won't be using start, so let's get rid of that. And we're also, in this case, going to be able to dictate the velocity of the bullet. So up here at the top, we'll put in a public vector3 and call it velocity. Then we will also, inside of the update, use that velocity to move the bullet. So it'll be this .transform.translate by the velocity. Okay, so that's our code, nice and simple. Save it, go back into Unity. Then we're going to select our bullet prefab, which is still in the hierarchy, and drag and drop that move script onto it. Now, what's nice about this velocity setting like this is that you can have that bullet move sideways, you can have it go up, you can have it go down. You can also have it moving in the Z direction, which would be in and out of the screen, but in this case we're sort of working in 2D, so we don't want that. We want this bullet to go up, and up in this case is going positively in the Y direction. So over in your velocity, let's change the Y to something like, let's try 0.1 and let's just see how fast that is. So let's just press play now to see what we get with the bullet. Yep, okay, that's not too bad. That's how fast it's going to go, and you can then adjust it to however you want in the move script. Right, we've got that. We've got our bullet prefab pretty much done for now. Drag and drop that into your assets to make it into an actual prefab. Then delete the one you've got in the hierarchy because we're not going to use that. We actually want to instantiate it from the ship controls. So to instantiate our bullets, open up the drive script. At the top underneath our speed, let's put in here public game object bullet, like that. Then inside of the update, we want to instantiate this bullet when we press the spacebar. So let's put an if input dot get key down is space, and inside of that we're going to instantiate our bullet. So this is instantiate bullet this dot transform dot position, so the position of the ship, because this script is on the ship, and we'll use a quaternion dot identity to just leave it at a 0 rotation. All right, so this will now instantiate our bullet. Save that, switch back to Unity, and we will click on the ship in the hierarchy. There will now be a bullet to drag and drop your prefab into. So grab that bullet prefab and drag that over and drop it down there. All right, so let's play and try pressing the space bar. Move our ship, and you can see we've got these bullets. And you can also see as we create them, have a look over in the hierarchy. We're creating bullets, we're not destroying them at any point, and the hierarchy is getting full and full of bullets. Now, we can, of course, control this by destroying them when they go outside of the view of the camera. So that's one way to make sure that you just don't have too many of them taking up memory. So let's do that right now. So stop playing, and we're going to create another little script that's just going to destroy these objects outside of the camera view. So let's go C#. We will call it destroy in viz. So when it becomes invisible, we'll destroy it. Open that up in your editor. Then we'll just get rid of everything in here, and we'll have a void on became invisible. and inside of there we will put a destroy this dot game object. So it will destroy anything that goes outside of your camera's viewing volume that this script is attached to. So save that. Back in Unity, we will now get our bullet prefab and drag and drop that destroy in Viz onto it. Okay, test that out, press play. Let's move across the screen and we can watch our bullet prefabs getting created over in the hierarchy over here and disappearing as they go outside. Now, one little hint if you don't know about that on became invisible, it must be on an object that has a renderer. Otherwise it won't work. So if you've got a higher level parent that your renderer is a child of, then putting the script with on became invisible on it is not going to work. So it's only going to work with a renderer. I've seen a lot of students put that on became invisible on higher level prefabbed objects and it just not working and they're not knowing what it's doing. That's why I'm kind of pointing it out here. Now we need an asteroid prefab. So we're going to create in your hierarchy an asteroid. So 2D object sprite, let's call that asteroid. And then drag and drop your sprite asteroid from your assets over onto the sprite renderer for it. You'll immediately see an asteroid appear on the screen. Now you can make that bigger or smaller depending on your preference, but what we do need to do is add our circle collider to it. So we'll go add in the inspector and then go down to circle collider 2D to add that, and again you can adjust it as you wish. We will also have it fall. Now, rather than have it fall using that move script that I created for the bullets, we're going to have it fall under gravity. We need to put a rigid body onto this object anyway, which is what's going to make it automatically fall, so that we can detect a collision between the bullet and the asteroid. If one of the things doesn't have a rigid body on it, you're not going to be able to detect the collision. So let's add a component. We're going to go rigid body. We need a 2D rigid body in this case. Add that and you'll automatically see it has gravity on it. You see the gravity scale is set to 1, which means it's going to start falling down the screen immediately. And we can see that right now if we press play. Let's just grab that asteroid, just move it up the screen a little bit. We will hit play and it should, under its own rigid bodiness, fall like it did there. Okay, so that's that asteroid. Now we can create a whole bunch of asteroids as we did with the bullets and they will then fill up the hierarchy. You probably want them when they go outside of the camera to destroy themselves. We know how to do that because we already have that script. So we can drag and drop our destroy in Viz onto our asteroid to ensure that it does destroy. Then we can just grab that asteroid. In fact, you know what I'm going to do? Just change this name to asteroid prefab to be consistent and drag and drop that into our assets. We now have an asteroid prefab that we can spawn lots of versions of. Let's get rid of that from the hierarchy. Now let's create an asteroid spawner. So in the hierarchy, right click and create an empty, and let's call that asteroid spawner, funnily enough. What we're going to do with that is probably move it up the screen a bit so that our asteroids are going to fall from above here. But first of all, we will just make it spawn stuff so we can see where it is exactly. We need a script to do that. So back into our assets, right click, create C#, script, call it spawn. Then open that up in your editor. Inside of it, we're going to pass through the prefab for the asteroid. So up the top, we want a public game object asteroid. And then we want to create lots and lots of them. So let's do that inside of the update. Now I'll be a bit sneaky here and paste in my code that I've written before because there's a fair bit of it. Well, as far as there's 3 lines of it, but that's still a fair bit to type and get it all right in the one go. What it's doing is it's instantiating an asteroid at the position of the spawner plus a x offset. So we need to add a vector onto that, which will have a random x value. Now this x value will depend on how far on either side of the spawner you want it to be. Now I've got it set to 10, and you'll be able to see based on your screen where you're getting them positioned as they come through. So now we have those. Let's just save that, and we're going to attach that to our asteroid spawner, and we're going to set the prefab for the asteroid into the asteroid slot. Right, press play. This is going to create an awful lot of asteroids because they're going to come out all at once. Now, this is obviously just way too many. The colliders on them are also forcing them to bump around in that, which is all right. That's if you want to do that. If you didn't want them to hit each other, I guess you could then put them on the same sort of layer and stop the physics for that. But that's fine. Now you can see the spawner is, pretty much in the center of the screen. So I'm just going to stop playing and just going to lift that up. Press play. That was the spawner, by the way, that I just lifted up. And now you can see that they're spawning above. Again, it is way too many. So we really need to take care of that by adding a little bit of randomness into the script to control how many objects are spawning in any update. So we go back into our code, which was the spawn code. And what I'm going to do in this case is put just a little bit of a random around it. So if random.range between 0 and 100 gives us a value less than, say, 5, so this is about 5% of the time, it will generate an asteroid. Let's finish this code off with some brackets. Like that. Okay, so you could have an invoke repeating, or you could have an invoke that then invokes itself again randomly. That works as well. I find this is a really quick way just to get this to work as far as getting random spawning going. Save this. We will go back to Unity, press play, and this time we should see a lot fewer. Yep, and you should be able to move among them as well. Like that. There's no collider on your ship, so they're not going to bounce off it. You could, I guess, put a collider on your ship if you wanted for some extra effect. Let's do that anyway. Select the ship in the hierarchy and just quickly add in a collider. You want a 2D circle collider like we've added before. Now those asteroids were quite fast as they came down, so you might want to restrict the amount of gravity on the prefab. Select the prefab in the assets, go over to the inspector, and we will change. You can also add some drag in it if you wanted it to be a bit slower as it fell down. So we could change that to let's say 0.5 and try it. So let's press play with that. Yep, okay, so they're a bit slower, and they do hit the ship as well, as you can see there. All right, so that is now our basis for our game. We don't yet have the shooting working. We'll look at that in the next video, but we do have all of the elements that we need to continue working on this and then add in the pooling system.